Hello everyone. So it's page 502 if you have one of these church Bibles. If you have your own Bible, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, the Psalms, Proverbs, you'll find it. 502, Esther, chapter 2. Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, "Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young women, the woman who pleases the king, be queen instead of Vashti." This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive when Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Hegai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Hegai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked to and fro near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Hegai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now, the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the 2 officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the Annals in the presence of the king. And this is God's word.
Take your seats, and if you could have that chapter open that David read for us so helpfully a minute or two ago, as we look into that together, the next installment of this enthralling story, this engaging story in the Old Testament, this book of Esther. I guess some of you will have experienced this, many of you will have experienced this, sitting at home with your loved ones, your family, your spouse, your partner, whoever, watching a film, watching a TV series, and as you get into it, one of you, as you're sitting there, might ask the question, who's that? Why did they say that? Where did they come from? Where are they now? What's that all about? And as those sort of questions start to get asked, one of you will lovingly just grab hold of the remote and pause it and just say, well, they said this and they did that for this reason. Them, we don't know who they are yet. We don't know why they did that yet. And if you put your crochet down and concentrate, you can relate to that particular story, I'm sure. These early chapters in Esther work a bit like that. There's a lot going on, and there's lots of little details. It's like a master screenwriter just putting together some of those little details, little sort of views of people, place, events, just to help us get our bearings and to sort of follow our way through the story. Some of what we read and some of the things that we're going to notice in chapter 2 this evening won't make any sense to us until we get further into the story. So you'll need to come back next week and the week after to sort of understand why some of these things happen. But where we were, John helped us last week just to notice in chapter 1, we're about 480 BC in the largest empire on the face of the earth at that time, the most powerful empire. If you look at the beginning of chapter 1, Xerxes ruled over 127 provinces. This is the Persian Empire, stretching from India across to Kush, Ethiopia. And they're in Susa, we're in the citadel, this sort of heart of economic and military and political power in the then known world, right at the heart of government. And John helped us just to notice that what makes Persia tick and what makes the empire work and what seems to be the heart of it all is performance and appearance, how you look and how you perform. It's all about power and beauty. But underneath the surface, there's this dark underbelly that just began to be talked about a little bit last week, and we see in this reading today this sort of underbelly of abuse, of power and control, particularly in an environment where God is not worshipped or honoured, and in our book, not named at all. When God is apparently absent, things can be incredibly difficult and upsetting. We saw last week how King Xerxes basically had these drunken feasts. He had one for his nobles and then another for the people around him. And at this drunken feast, he wanted to display how powerful and important he was by putting his wife, the queen, on display, to have her parade in front of all the nobles and show everybody how great he was because of the queen that he had. And we saw how Queen Vashti refused. She wasn't going to play that game. And as she refused to do that, she was banished from the empire. No more will she be queen, and we don't hear much more about her. As we get to chapter 2, as it was read, it felt, and perhaps as it was read, just does it feel like a little bit more like palace politics? As just this story develops, sort of builds on what we learnt last week, but gets worse, if anything. And as it was read, did you think, that sounds familiar? Sounds a bit like what we hear in the news. And just in the news headlines all around us today. I mean, chapter 2 is sort of Persia's Got Talent crossed with Love Island, crossed with our news headlines, sadly, from just this past week. Begs the question, doesn't it? Where is God? The name of God is not named in this book at all. Where is God when things like this just carry on and seem to just flow unchecked in society? Where is God? Is he active? Does he care? Can we depend on him? If you wanted a heading for chapter 2, William Cowper was a hymn writer in the 18th century here, not far from here in Olney. And he wrote probably one of his most famous hymns, was his last hymn. and it was just the first line, God moves in a mysterious way. It's become a bit of a proverb. God moves in mysterious ways, boys. If that's, anybody's ever said that to you, the Lord moves in mysterious ways. He didn't write that. He said, God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. And really, as I was thinking this week, you couldn't really come up with a better heading for chapter 2 of the book of Esther than that. God moves in a mysterious way. And it's relatable for us as well, isn't it? Because we all of us kind of have those moments in our lives where we think, what on earth is going on? Is God at work? Is God with me? Is God really here in this situation I find myself in? We don't find ourselves in royal palaces and in powerful courts in government for the most part, but we do find ourselves in offices and kitchens and classrooms and hospitals and in homes and amongst families. And we're involved with job interviews and the election cycle, and you just think, with all this stuff going on, well, what is going on? Is God at work? And that was the sort of scratching my head a bit when you get to chapter 2, with all this stuff going on. Where is God behind this? Well, I want to encourage you a bit this evening, just 3 ways to see that God moves in a mysterious way. Firstly, in unchosen circumstances. As you think of all those things you're wrestling with in your life this week, maybe tomorrow morning that you face, God moves in mysterious ways in unchosen circumstances. I think sat-nav gets quite a lot of mentions in church sermons as far as I can make out as an illustration, but I'm not going to apologise. I'm going to use it again as another illustration. I think at one and the same time, sat-nav is one of the most helpful tools that's been developed in recent years that sits on my phone, and at the same time, one of the most frustrating and maddening tools on my phone at any particular time. Because well, this is the route that we use quite a bit. We go up north to see family, and you can see even from that, there's about 3 ways you could get there. You've got the M1 or the A1, and then when you get off either of those, there's other roads, and to be honest, this is just simple. Often you get presented with about 6 different routes you could possibly take to where you're getting to go to. And I don't really use sat-nav like that because I know where I'm going, but I just want to know where the traffic jams are and where the accidents are and which is going to be the best route to take. And often it'll give you this, and then it'll say reroute and send you off, turn right here. And I think, I don't want to go down that dark, potholey, muddy B road to shave 30 seconds off my ETA to get to my destination. I know where I'm going. It's all roughly the same. But sat-nav says to me, no, this is the road you want. This is the road I choose to use. This is the road you want, but this is the road I choose to use. And for the people in our story, the characters that we're going to be introduced to in our story this evening, there is a sort of macro detour and a micro detour. So the macro detour is, well, verse 5, in the citadel of Susa, a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish. That's quite an important dynasty, quite an important line. It links him to King Saul historically in his line. He'd been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, among those taken captive with Jehoiachin, king of Judah. What that verse actually says, when you dig into it, it says he was exiled with the exiles who were exiled. So you're kind of meant to get the picture. He's in exile. He's not where he wants to be. That's the macro detour. Some of the guys have gone home, but he's still here in this unchosen situation. And we're also introduced to his cousin named Hadassah, whom he'd brought up. Unchosen circumstances there, aren't there? Young woman who had neither father nor mother, and it underscores that he'd taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. Here's an incredibly vulnerable young girl, teenage girl in a foreign empire, at the heart of the story, no father and mother, just powerless. But we're told that she's beautiful. She has a lovely figure and was beautiful. And I'll let you decide as the story goes on whether that's a curse or a blessing in Susa, the citadel, for this young girl. See, because she's then on this micro detour. She gets the macro detour is exile. The micro detour for her life is this order and edict that is proclaimed. As the king at the beginning of the chapter remembers what had happened with Queen Vashti and what he'd decreed about her, his friend, his nobleman, his attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. We need a replacement for Vashti, and they appoint commissioners across the whole of the nation, the whole of the empire. And, verse 4 is quite telling, isn't it? The young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king. Of course it does. And he followed it. You know, you're going to find all these beautiful women that are going to get paraded before you. Of course it appealed to the king. And she gets swept into this beauty contest on steroids to try and find this replacement queen for this powerful man at the heart of the most powerful empire on the planet. Verse 8, when the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel and put under the care of Hegai. Esther also was taken. That word taken has the sense of being taken into custody. There's a sense in which she's got no agency over this. She's got no say in this matter. She's got no control. She can't choose whether to go or not. She's taken. But she pleases the ruler of the harem, the leader of the harem, Hegai, the steward, who looks after it. But she's then taken and exposed to this beauty treatment for 12 months before, verse 15, the time comes for Esther to go to the king. It's so contemporary, isn't it? A young woman being taken from her setting and trafficked to become a plaything for rich and powerful men. And it is upsetting. I don't know whether you felt that sense of anger, upset, as David read it to you. But as John said, as we look in the Old Testament, particularly as we read Old Testament narrative like that, we're looking for comment to try and help us understand what's going on, the comments of the narrator, the writer, and he makes none. There is none made about the rights and the wrongs and whether she should or whether she shouldn't. And commentators seem to tie themselves up in knots as to whether it was right or whether it was wrong or whether she should have gone or whether she should have refused. The text just presents it. This happened. It's just a historical record. This is what happened to Esther in Susa. And I think that's what we're meant to make of it, actually. Because life is like that. Life is complicated. Life is complex. There are decisions which sometimes you think, is it right, is it wrong, or is it just a sort of grey, I don't know. And of course the Bible has a lot to say to this in different places. But at this point, we're not meant to say, is it right, is it wrong? We're just saying, this is what happened. She was placed in a difficult, almost impossible position, wasn't she? And we like to think in our 21st century kind of wisdom that we have a degree of control over our lives. You know, the bit of money in our pocket perhaps gives an illusion that we have some control. Technology at our fingertips gives us an illusion that we have a degree of control over our lives. That the advances in medical science and health for all of us means that we perhaps feel like we've got a degree of control over our lives, but actually we don't have that much control really, do we? Over the things that happen to us week after week, day after day, we don't have that much control. And so is it just as our friends who perhaps, you know, we work with, we mix with, is it just fate? Is it just that's how it was meant to be? Is it just that it was written in the stars that this week X happened to you? Is it just luck? Is it just destiny? Or is there a God behind the scenes at work? You know, when your job doesn't quite work out as you'd hoped, not quite what you had in mind when you took the job on, that health diagnosis that comes unlooked for, the situation in your family. I know that some of you, even just this week, something has just come and cut across family life, and you think, what on earth is going on this week? That life situation that was unlooked for, unchosen. For us as a church, as we were trying to think about before this service, we had a small meeting here just thinking about the building project and the rejection of the building project on Monday that hit quite hard, if I'm honest, and felt painful on Monday when we got that email. We don't control it much, do we? But behind it all, Christians use this word providence. Behind the scenes, providence. God is at work. even unseen, unspoken about here in Esther chapter 2. Providence is God's purposeful, powerful presence in the world that he has made, in the creation that he has made for his people behind the scenes, even at work in unchosen circumstances. What about Mordecai, this character? God is at work. God moves in mysterious way in ordinary faithfulness. This is a book that we've used a few times, and we're thinking about returning to it in the series Fruitfulness on the Frontline. We found it really helpful as a church family a few years ago. And it tells stories of people that just faithfully serve God on the front line. We can leave that up, that's fine. That picture's great. This is the story of Louise, not our Louise, a different Louise. Louise worked for an ogre. She was PA to probably the most unreasonable boss in Buckinghamshire. He was bad-tempered, temperamental, indifferent to others, changeable, and she worked for the ogre for 3 years. Prayed for strength, prayed that he would change, prayed that he would become a follower of Jesus, but he didn't. And she felt like an abject failure. In the end, she decided she couldn't take it anymore, and she left, feeling like she'd let God down. A few weeks later, she got a phone call from the woman who'd replaced her. "He's impossible. I've been here 3 weeks, and I'm already thinking of leaving." So I talked to a couple of people, and they told me to give you a call. They said, "You'd done a fantastic job, that you'd always been gracious and upbeat despite his impossible ways. How did you do it?" How did she do it? Well, first of all, she didn't realise she'd done anything. She thought often that she'd failed. Often we don't think we've done anything much to write about either. We're just living our lives as best we can. And then someone tells us, "You were so kind, so patient, so self-controlled when everyone else was losing their heads, when it looked as if we were going down, and perhaps we don't think much of it." Well, I suppose, but it's just what I do. I mean, there's nothing remarkable in that. We're like dolphins being told we're good at swimming. It doesn't seem very remarkable unless, of course, you're a lobster, a seahorse, or a kangaroo. Mark Green's got a great way with words. Mordecai just keeps showing up. He just keeps turning up, faithfully showing up. Now, I don't know how he felt about this situation. If you think just of his that destiny, the dynasty, that I mentioned he was part of, you think what he might have been in that royal line almost. But here he is, just faithfully bringing up, taking in an orphan with all the associated childcare costs in Persia to take on another mouth to feed in his home. And he keeps turning up day after day. It says that in verse 11. Did you notice that? Every day Mordecai comes to where Esther is in this harem, and he walks to and fro near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her day after day. How are you doing? Are you okay? Is there anything you need? Just checking in. Faithfully, just doing the same every day. And he was a wise advisor. Several times it says that he told her to basically keep her head down and not reveal her nationality, 2 or 3 times in the passage. And Esther kept that secret, verse 20, about her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do so. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up, just faithfully caring for the child, caring for his family, looking after them, bringing them up. So that here's this individual who becomes this hero of the story in future weeks. Does life feel like that for you? School gate tomorrow. You've done the same walk with the same child to the same school gate and had the same conversation every morning for as long as you can remember. And you get to the school gate and you have the same conversation with the same other group of mums and dads. And how was your weekend? What did you get up to? Yeah, I did park run. Yeah, we did this. Yeah. And it's just the same old every day. Or you go to the office tomorrow morning and you just look at the same screen and probably deal with the same spreadsheet that you've looked at for the same however long. But faithfully, you're just doing the same thing. You're showing up day after day after day. And God can work in ordinary faithfulness. He moves in mysterious ways just in those ordinary faithful moments. Because our problem is that our assumption is that God only works in the big stuff, in the big platforms and the big emotions and the big impact moments. God was just as much at work on Monday morning when that email hit our inboxes about our building application as he was in the big arenas and the big concerts and the stuff that you look at on your Instagram reel when you think, why doesn't our church look like that church? But we fall into that trap, don't we? If God were really at work in my life, it would feel different. It would just feel different to this. I wonder if that's how Mordecai felt as he just went again the next morning to care for Esther. God's purposeful, powerful presence is behind all of those conversations that you have every day, those moments that you interact with the same people day after day, those prayers that you've offered for your colleagues, for your friends, for your family, time after time after time. God's providence is there working behind the scenes. The care that you give to the elderly relative who can't remember your name anymore or wonders why you've come again. That nappy that you change again at 3 o'clock in the morning as you comfort and swaddle an upset child. For that moment of honesty or integrity in the workplace that perhaps goes unnoticed or is noticed and actually means that you get overlooked for a promotion or the next step. God is at work in ordinary faithfulness, as he was in Mordecai's life. And thirdly, God moves in mysterious way in overlooked moments. When you get to the end of the chapter, you think, is that a bit of a footnote? Verses 21 to 23. Why do we suddenly go there after this story of Esther's appointment as queen? This is a picture of Nicholas Winton. Well, it's actually not Nicholas Winton. It's Anthony Hopkins playing Nicholas Winton. But in the 1980s, there's a kind of famous old TV program called This Is Your Life. Some of you will remember it. And one program, Nicholas was devoted to this guy, Nicholas Winton, in the late 80s. His story had gone untold, unnoticed, unmentioned for, decades, 50 years, 40, 50 years. In the late 30s, he went to Prague. He cancelled a skiing holiday and went to Prague because he wanted to just go and help children escape from the oncoming Nazi attacks there. He was just one man. He didn't have a government position, and he didn't do anything grand. He says he just filled in forms, he wrote lists, he bought train tickets, but he got children out. But his story remained unknown and unheralded for 50 years until his wife went up into the attic to clear some boxes and clear things away. And she came across this story, and it became so famous it became told on This Is Your Life. And as Esther Ranson interviewed him and talked about it, they said, if you were involved, if Nicholas Winton had an impact on your life, would you just mind standing up for us? It's very moving if you see it on YouTube. Just slowly, one by one, every single person in the room stood up. Every single person in the audience stood up. So that's a still from the film of his life, because the actual photos of the real event are rubbish. So that was a bit clearer. 669 children he got out. And it's thought that then children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, by the time of the 80s, late 80s, that program came on, there was over 6,000 people who were alive because this man just did the ordinary, faithful stuff that apparently was overlooked. During the time of Mordecai was sitting at King's Gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate the king. But Mordecai found out about it. He pushed it on up the line. He recorded it. It was reported, got to the king, and the issue was resolved. It was found out that it was true, and they were executed, impaled on poles. And it was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. Seems insignificant, but it's that wonderful screenwriter just putting that little detail in. Hold on to that until you come back for chapter 6 in a few weeks. God is at work in overlooked moments. God is playing a longer game than we realise. And he's looking for results that are way bigger than just the reward of one man in this story. Your most important moment, brothers and sisters, might not look much. It might have already happened. It may well have been overlooked. You might not even have realised that you've lived it yet. It might not be applauded. But God uses those. He writes those overlooked moments into his cosmic story of his kingdom. What a wonderful thing. And as we await that, with the uncertainty and the confusion and the just not knowing sometimes, we can rest back and lean into the fact that his purposeful, powerful presence is with you and is at work for your good and for his glory. I think this idea of providence has become a bit of a lost concept somehow. I think we like to think of providence as when things go well, when things happen that I'm looking to happen, when my prayers get answered in a positive way and I can see God at work and it all seems lovely. I think our forebears, previous generations, had a much bigger sense of the sort of imminent, the closeness of God being at work in every moment, in every small little thing of every day. We need to recapture something of that God is with us in those little things. I mentioned that hymn, God Moves in a Mysterious Way. Cooper wrote that. It was his final hymn. He struggled with mental health for most of his life. He attempted suicide. But he wrote this great line that behind a frowning providence, God hides a smiling face. It might look like all is against us. It might look like the guys that have been against the building project have won. But behind a frowning providence, God hides a smiling face. And we need to live that truth, brothers and sisters, as we go into our life. It's hard to read. It's almost impossible to know sometimes whether God is sort of this is this or this is that and this is right and that is wrong and this door is closed or that door is opened. But we lean back into this powerful, purposeful presence of God. And we just need to get comfortable with a degree of uncertainty, but trust him for the outcome. Silence doesn't mean inactivity. It doesn't mean he's not there. Not seeing a plan doesn't mean there isn't a plan. And a long wait doesn't mean you've made a wrong turn somewhere. We can trust him in the moment. It's purposeful, powerful presence. It's purposeful. There is a purpose in it all. And we're given a wonderful hint of it in verse 18 as the king gives a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials, and proclaims a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. There's a feast. That's the purpose. That's what God has in mind. As he chooses this road when we would rather have this one, it's going to get us there. It's going to get us to that point where we sit with our King and we feast with him forever. John's going to take us to this table in a minute, which is a little foretaste of when we will feast together with him. And this is what? Just a simple meal of bread and wine laid before us that what? Speaks of what Jesus has done for us. Not the road, perhaps, that he would have chosen or wanted, but chose that he was willing to go to bring a people back to himself. Ephesians 5 has this wonderful reminder. It tells husbands to love your wives just as Christ, here's the thing, loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. This is the purposeful, powerful presence of our God. That's where it's all leading. That's where he's taking us. Our identity, well, it's not Persian. It's not in beauty and it's not in performance, but it's in grace because it's all a gift from our God. Esther, she gives up her life and freedom for the king. Our King Jesus comes and gives up all of his life, all of his freedom to make an imperfect people beautiful, to be his perfect bride. What a wonderful, wonderful thing that is as he comes to the cross and he is far from beautiful. He's bloodied and he's bruised and he's disfigured. And yet in love, he goes there for you and for me so that we will enjoy this. Esther was loved because she was beautiful, but he comes in deep love to make you beautiful. And with that purpose in mind, we rest on his powerful presence in the road that he chooses to use.